If you have a plant this dangerous, with no evacuation plan, with all these fire safety exemptions, with all these mismatched transformers blowing up, nowhere to put the spent fuel, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it?
Back to RFL, I'm Andrew Whitman. Rich will rejoin us in a second. That was Riverkeeper President Paul Gallet slamming the Indian Point nuclear power plant. The latest fire last weekend and fuel spill, renewing calls to close the place. Short time ago, I spoke with Mike Toomey, who is the president of external affairs at Entergy. That is the company that operates Indian Point. Let's start. I understand there's some new information about the cleanup efforts and even about some of the numbers when it comes to what exactly spilled into the Hudson River.
That's correct. We are continuing the work at the facility, and what we've gotten so far is an estimate of what we think we have captured. And the process, we have a transformer that's full of it's a light dielectric oil. It's like a mineral oil that's used as an insulator inside the transformer. What we've done is we've recovered a significant amount of that from the moat underneath the transformer, which is about 6,000 gallons or so.
Okay.
We've also got a calculation of how much burned during the fire, and that's another 2,300 gallons. So what that gets you is about 8,300 gallons of that dielectric oil that we can account for. And that leaves us with about 16,000 gallons that as of right now, we can't account for. We don't know how much of that may have reached the river because we still are continuing our review. We still have oil that may have gotten into the ground there. We've got a discharge canal. We've got protective booms out there.
So there are other places where that oil can go
on site,
short of the river, before
Correct.
it gets into the river.
Correct.
And have you been able to check the booms yet, which are in place to try to sop up anything that is going into the river?
We have not seen any significant amounts of oil in the discharge canal. We've also been working in coordination with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and with the United States Coast Guard to do an evaluation of the river, and over the last several days we have not seen any significant amounts of the oil. And the other thing to keep in mind is that when they put the fire out, they used a foam, which is has an animal fat based content, which can also produce a sheen. So in the course of reviewing everything that we see out in the river, we have to make sure that we're in a position to make a difference between what came out of the foam and what came out of the oil in the transformer.
And for more, we're going to turn to former Journal News staff writer Greg Clary, if I could say that. Greg is a friend, and he is somebody who has forgotten more about Indian Point and how the nuclear industry works than I will ever know. So, Greg, thanks for coming on the show.
You're generous. I'm glad to be here.
I certainly am. So, when you heard the story about what happened at Indian Point and the fire last weekend, what was your big question, and what do you think the big takeaway is?
How much is in the river? How much oil is in the river? I knew right away that since it was a transformer fire, that it wasn't a big deal nuclear-wise. So, and they said right away that was the case. I mean, they always do. But and even checking up on things with the NRC today, I was pretty clear with them that that was the situation. So
Entergy says there's 16,000 gallons of this dielectric oil that's not accounted for yet. Now, first of all, let's put that in perspective, because how much water does the plant take in and spit out over the course of a day?
it's over 2 billion, I think 2.5 billion gallons a day.
So that's 2.5 billion gallons versus 16,000 gallons of oil
Right, I
that
mean,
are unaccounted for.
Yeah, one's a pollutant, one's
Right.
water.
Right.
So, I mean, you have that issue. But I mean, in this situation, I think they have a moat that goes around this area that collects, and I believe it's supposed to be 90,000 gallons. At least that's what the NRC is saying. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. I know that there was reports of 67,000 gallons being captured, but of course
they're not entirely sure what they have yet on site. There are still other places where there could be more oil.
And some of it went up in the air when it burned. So I do think it's important. You have freighters on there, Andrew, every day with oil coming off of them. I mean, how much oil is anywhere, and who knows what the deal is.
But at the same time, I don't want to discount what's been done here, because we certainly know the Hudson's endured all sorts of abuse over the years. So any drop
I swim in
more,
it, so I know.
You swim in the Hudson River?
I do.
Better man than I am. But any more that goes in there is problematic. The larger issue in all this, because you've got everybody who's a critic of the plant coming out and saying, well, this is just another argument that it should be shut down or that doesn't have much of a tenable political future. We'll separate the NRC for now. From a political standpoint, the knives are out for Indian Point. It seems like anybody who had opposed it already, who has any leverage or power of a microphone, is really going after the plant.
Well, one of the things that concerned me a little bit is that Governor Cuomo went there twice in one weekend. So that's a situation of how bad is this? Is this really bad? And if there's something really bad, what does it mean if the governor goes there? Another time, did he cry wolf this time? Is it real this time? And he's been an avowed opponent of it for a long time. So in essence, you get a mistake. They made a mistake, and whatever.
But then when it comes to the NRC and relicensing, because one of the licenses is expired and they're operating under conditional, the other one comes up this year.
Yep.
Even all of this probably doesn't factor into the NRC process or the NRC thinking, does it?
No.
It's just operational stuff and safety of the nuclear side of the plant?
In essence, yes, and it's also how will it do going forward for another 20 years. If they get relicensed, they'll get another 20 years, and basically how will their systems work for the next 20 years. I mean, this is a relatively new transformer that burned, so.
Yeah, I think it's 4 years old.
Right, I mean, you know.
Very quickly, while I've got you here, you know this scene better than I do. It's going to get relicensed, isn't it? At some point.
Well, if I were a betting man, I mean, based on the results of every other relicensing application, yes, they've all gone through. So likely.
All right, Greg Clary, thanks so much for being here. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Andrew.
We're going to talk more about Indian Point on my weekend show, Newsbreakers. It airs on FiOS 1 News, Lower Hudson Valley. Bill and Richard, the two very small heads behind me, will join me, of course. And tomorrow, right here on RFL, well, that's today, actually. We already heard from Mike Twomey, the president of External Affairs. You'll hear more from him on Newsbreakers as well. So up next, Rich is back, the man who literally wrote the book on Michelle Obama. The First Lady is a woman of a lot of firsts. She makes it look easy, but we're going to find out with Rich how it's not.